Okay, so it looks like we've got most people looks like have arrived at the meeting. Welcome to our first ETS auctions user group. It's great to be here today. It is a shame that we're having to do this online, but it is the nature of the environment that we're living in at the moment. I can't see how many participants we've got at the moment. We've got about 45 or so. So we've got a really good number attending today. And it's great to have just the interest in this user group, particularly at this time of the year as well too. Welcome, as I say, I'm Shane Dynan. I'm joined here today by Rebecca Young, who is just off the screen, is helping with some of the coordination and logistics of today's meeting. Also got Tim Chadwick next door to me here as well, George Jenner and Tyler Corbett as well, who will be talking. Also welcome James Coombs from the MFE. He's our ETS manager, and James will be talking just after this initial introduction. AEX were keen to join, but we're unable to, just for a couple of reasons. One is the time zone. It's the middle of the night over there in Germany at the moment, and also what they're currently doing at the moment is that they're launching a carbon auction scheme for the local German government there, and they are just sort of as all hands at the pump over there at the moment on that. So they do send their apologies to this meeting, and they will be here for the next meeting. This event, it's being, as you might have seen on the video or on the webcast there, this is being recorded as well too, and we're also going to put all the presentations, the various papers, the agendas and the minutes onto the auctions website as well too, so they'll be available at some stage soon. Just in terms of the agenda, we've really broken this up into two parts, into two broad parts. First up is we've got part one, which is talking about sort of the observations of the auctions that we've had so far this year. And then also the second part of the event is going to be taking a forward-looking view as well, and talking about some of the enhancements or improvements we'd like to consider to the auctions. We've also got a short 5-minute break in between as well too, just to enable everyone just to stretch their legs. We recognise it's certainly a busy time at this time of the year for everybody, and also these video meetings can be quite tiring as well too. So we've got a 5-minute break in between it. We would like this to be as interactive as possible, recognising that we are on this type of format does make it difficult. But if you do want to, if you do have questions throughout our presentations, or when we move to the discussion parts as well, if you could just raise the hand feature within this setup, and we'll look to come to your questions there. And it's also sort of easiest for us to manage that way rather than having multiple people potentially sort of talking at the same time. We've also got, there's also a chat feature within there as well too. If you've got questions or comments in there, please feel free to use that, and we'll look to address those as we move through this meeting. We've got about, we should be intending to wrap up just before 3 o'clock, just before 4 o'clock, so about 10 to 4. The meeting room we're in is actually booked after that, so we will have to have a hard close at that particular point. If we've still got things to cover off, we can always reconvene at another time, or address questions, queries through some other forum as well. I see that we have got a lot of people there with videos on. We would really appreciate it if you do turn your video on. It helps us in terms of knowing who we're talking to. It means we're not necessarily talking to a blank screen as well too. So if you're comfortable having your video screen on, that would be very much appreciated. So just looking at we've just got an update from James just before we move on to that as well too. Just one thing I was going to talk about was also the terms of reference. That came out with the agenda. It's a version we just finalised just a couple of weeks ago, but it sort of talks about sort of what the focus and the purpose of this user group is about. We're keen to take feedback or comments on this terms of reference. If you haven't got a copy, we can always sort of send you out afterwards. But broadly, the purpose of the meeting is to invite feedback and suggestions from participants and stakeholders around our service delivery as auction operator, but also your comments, feedback around the overall functioning of the market as well too, and its operational design. And on the same, on the flip side, it's an opportunity for us to be able to keep you all sort of update on planned and suggested enhancements to the platform as we move forward. We've all got an interest in having auctions remaining fit for purpose, being resilient to changes in market conditions and so on. So we're really keen to use this as an opportunity to engage with participants, engage with stakeholders, and really look to make our auctions the best auctions in the world. Membership for the group, it's open to anybody that is a registered participant within auctions, but also invitations are extended to a wider stakeholder group as well too. So that ensures that we're getting a broad range of views and participation within our discussions. Anybody can contribute to the discussions as well too, so there's no sort of observer rights or non-speaking rights or anything like that. We will convene these meetings approximately at 6 monthly intervals, or as demands change over the course of time. We'll typically hold them in either Wellington or Auckland, but we'll also have the feature, this video feature as well too throughout as well. So if you can't attend a physical meeting, this option is always available. Importantly also is that we can't engage obviously in any anti-competitive behaviour that would breach anything around the Commerce Act. So I think that's an obvious statement, but I think it's just important to reiterate it as well too. So certainly please just be mindful of that in any conversations or discussions that we're having today. So look, just before we move on to James, is there any initial comments or feedback that people might have on the terms of reference at this point? No. Okay. So all right. So there doesn't appear to be any. So I'll pass you over to James Coombs, ETS manager at MFE, and James is going to talk about sort of an update from the ministry, particularly what's been going on over the last year and what's coming up as well too. So James, over to you.
Cool. Thanks, Shane. Kia ora koutou, ko James Coombs tōku ingoa. So as Shane said, I'm the manager of the Emissions Trading Scheme Policy Team here in the Climate Change Directorate at the Ministry for the Environment. As one of the world's oldest emissions trading schemes, the New Zealand ETS is a key tool for meeting New Zealand's domestic and international climate change targets, including the 2050 target set by the Commerce Act 2002. Since it was legislated in 2008, the ETS has continued to evolve to ensure it continues to be fit for purpose, with one of the most recent changes being the introduction of the New Zealand ETS Managed Auction Service, which commenced this year. The ETS auctions are the government's mechanism to supply NZUs directly to the market in line with our emission budgets, and the auctions are managed on behalf of the government by the New Zealand Stock Exchange and the European Energy Exchange, EEX. So to provide a bit of the Ministry's observations around how the auctions have performed across 2022, from the Ministry's perspective, the 4 2021 ETS auctions have operationally ran very well. We are very pleased with how the managed auction service has been adopted by the market and has been operated by the NZX and EEX. Moving into the auctions for 2022 and beyond, the Ministry continues to see it as important that the auction continues to evolve in a manner which ensures that the market is provided certainty and transparency, which in turn will support informed decision making by market participants. This is also something in line with the climate who commented in their Inaya Tonu Nei, a low emissions future for Aotearoa report, which was published in May of this year. We welcome today's auction user group as an opportunity to hear from the auction users about their experience to date, which may inform the future evolution of the NZ ETS operational auction environment and areas for efficiency, noting that the auctions do need to operate within the ETS regulatory parameters. Before I hand back to the NZX representatives, I'd just like to provide a high-level overview of the key 2022 updates for the ETS auction unit supply and price control settings, as well as some key areas of wider ETS policy work which the Ministry will focus on during the next year. The first is with regards to the auction unit supply and price setting. The government is required to set an overall limit, known as a cap, on NZUs supplied to the market over 5-year periods. This is known as the 5-year rolling period. And within the cap, an overall volume is set for how many NZUs are auctioned per year. For 2022, the unit volume is largely the same as this year, with a slight increase of 300,000 NZUs for a maximum available units of 26.3 million. Includes the CCR, or Cost Containment Reserve, of 7 million NZUs. From a price control setting perspective, in 2022, there is an increase in the Cost Containment Reserve trigger price, which goes from this year $50 to next year $70, and the auction floor price from $20 to $30. These price control setting updates align with the Climate Change Commission recommendations in the May report. Moving beyond next year, unit supply and price control settings, it's going to be quite a busy year for our team working with the Climate Change Commission. The first step is that we require the publication of the emission budgets. They have been delayed until the end of May 2022 due to the impact of COVID-19 and the delayed consultation on the emissions reduction plan. The emissions budget delay means that the Climate Change Commission, who has a regulatory statutory requirement to provide advice on unit supply and price control settings for 2023 to 2027, cannot commence until the emission budgets are set. Once they're set, at the latest by May, then the Climate Change Commission can provide on unit supply and price control settings. And this will be the first year that they have done this for the auctions. We are then likely to have consultation and then provide an update to the ETS setting regulations from mid-22 onwards. Due to the delay caused by COVID, we have removed the 3-month notification period to ensure that we provide more time to consult and update on the ETS settings for 2023 onwards. So from 2023 beyond that, Climate Change Commission recommendations and our updates will then become part of our annual BAU regulatory update exercise. So just moving on to 3 key areas of ETS policy work that we will be focusing on in 2022, which are beyond the auction itself, but are still related to but distinct from. And they highlight the many moving parts of the wider ETS space that need to be continuously monitored and reviewed by the Ministry for the Environment to ensure the ongoing effectiveness of the overall ETS. The first relates to industrial allocation. So the industrial allocation is the provision of free emission units, NZUs, to industries considered emissions intensive and trade exposed, EITE. The purpose of industrial allocation is to reduce the risk of driving those firms that meet the criteria of EITE and the production and associated emissions overseas, which we call carbon leakage. The government is currently reviewing industrial allocation, as there is some evidence to suggest that firms may be allocated more units than they need to reduce the risk of emission leakage overseas. Consultation for this closed in September, and we are now completing the analysis and expect to make decisions on any changes next year. The second relates to market governance. And so the government is establishing a market governance framework to regulate the NZ ETS secondary market. The framework addresses risks around advice, risks to trading, and risks of market misconduct. Consultation and engagement sessions were held between August and September of 2021, and we are now in the policy analysis phase and expecting to provide decisions on a preferred governance framework next year. The last area relates to the voluntary carbon market. Voluntary carbon market is where there are voluntary emission removals or reductions outside a legal requirement or BAU operations. An updated VCM guidance is scheduled to be published following Cabinet approval. Publication was delayed to ensure that decisions that came out of the most recent Glasgow COP26 conference could be considered in that guidance. For more information about any of those policy areas, I'll refer you to the Ministry for the Environment website in the first instance. We've got consultation documents which can explain industrial allocation and market governance in more detail and what we consulted on. And I would also refer you to the Climate Change Commission website for a copy of their report I mentioned earlier. So I'll just move on to the finance slides. So I'm speaking on behalf of my colleague, Mark Higgins, within the Ministry for the Environment Finance team. So by no means am I an expert in the content here. So any questions that relate to this, I'll take offline and we'll respond separately. So from an MFE finance perspective, the auction finance processes are bedding in well, looking to streamline and enhance processes based on user feedback. The finance team are working very well with the NZX operations team. Invoices and settlement processes are looking efficient. And then I'll talk about the handling of the collateral on the next slide, which I know is a big area of focus for users. So cash collateral. So the use of cash collateral has been the most popular option to date. It is usually received 1 or 2 days prior to cutoff. So I think some key sort of pieces of feedback from an MFE finance perspective is ensuring that collateral has sufficient references for identification, and primary reference should be your NZETR number. It is important to note that MFE nor NZX can accept late receipt of collateral, which is per the auction regulations. And that goes back to one of my earlier comments that we have to act within the bounds of the regulations with regards to the ETS auctions. A reminder around international payments can take several days to show in the MFE bank account. So please ensure that there is sufficient time for that to be cleared. Recommendation of 3 days before collateral cutoff. With the return of collateral post-auction for those that are not successful, processes are prompt as possible, and collateral must be returned to the same originating bank account that it came. The last area is around non-cash collateral, standby letter of credit option for participants. Sorry, I'm just reading off the screen. Not wishing to deposit collateral, so regular users of this need to be pre-validated through MFE's bank. That helps speeds up the review process, and we can confirm that promptly. I think that the key point that Mark told me to convey is all participants considering the use of the SBLC, please indicate that intention to our finance team by that email address at least 15 working days prior to auction. You don't need to tell us how much money will be coming through, just that indication of intention. And early notification and pre-validation key to ensure collateral is confirmed by cutoff date. And just a reminder that charges can vary depending on your bank or financial institution. So this concludes sort of the ministry's update. I think thank you very much to the NZX for facilitating the inaugural user group forum. Want to thank all the auction participants for making the time to discuss your thoughts on the ongoing effectiveness and function of the ETS auction market and its operational design. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
It's great. Thanks. Thanks, James. Is there any questions?
I get feedback here. So it's Jennifer from Contact here. I have a question around the consultation on market governance. Do you have any idea of a rough time next year it'll be coming through? Sorry, I've got feedback in my headphones, so I could hear half me to talk.
At this stage, no. We have been looking to currently wrap up the summary of submissions report, which we will then be publicly releasing shortly. That's been the primary focus, and then with the holiday period, we'll be in a better position to communicate when we'll come back with an update.
And are you expecting that to be a more solid idea of where we're going forward, and then more consultations on top of that? And what kind of timeline do you think for implementation? I mean, it's quite a massive change to how we operate, what could be, so.
Yeah, I'm not an expert in I'm not leading the market governance, my exact team, so I can take that offline and provide you further detail. But at this stage, I think at the moment we're still working on the actual feedback consultation to then proceed forward and provide ministerial advice.
Okay, and so does that, would you expect that the ministry is going to be operating as the interim market auction monitor for the next year at least?
Yeah, so as the interim auction monitor, we will be continuing that for the foreseeable future until we get that clarity around what that market governance regime will look like.
Yeah, and I know you said you weren't really expert on the finance side of things, and you probably field enough questions around collateral. But I know you guys are all restricted by the regulations, but do you know if there's any work being done around amending those regulations at all to make the collateral a little bit less onerous than it is at the moment?
I can't speak to that. I don't know if NZX you engage more with the finance team than I do around collateral.
Yeah, there's been some discussion around how collateral is handled, around the timings for it. Currently, there's a 5-day prior to auction lead time. That's something that is under discussion, and also, we have managed to look at the return date for it. In terms of the methodology, that's something that I'll be covering a little bit later. But yes, we've received feedback from the market in terms of that methodology, and as I say, I'll go through that in a little bit more detail moving forward.
Already speaking.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Hi. Who was that?
Yeah, I could. Hang on. I'll just turn you up. Oh, are you still there?
Yes.
Oh.
Who was that? I can't. We can't see who that was. Unfortunately, we can't get everyone up on the same screen. So whoever that was, if they could maybe unmute themselves again or something.
I think there was an accidental conversation.
Oh, was that? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Any further questions? Thanks, Jennifer.
Can anybody hear me?
Yes. Is that Susan?
It's Susan from Green Experts. Voluntary carbon market, James. Do you have a date on that cabinet decision?
It'll be within Q1 is my understanding at the moment, because the current guidance is currently dated until the end of this calendar year. So there is very much a intention to provide further direction as soon as possible.
Okay, that'd be great. Thanks, James.
Okay. Well, look, there doesn't appear to be any further questions. Thanks very much, James. That was a really good update, and I think 2022 is going to be certainly a busy year for the ministry and the Climate Change Commission, and we very much we look forward to the outputs of the ministry next year around this. So thank you.
Yep.
Now the next part of the session, I'll hand over to Tyler Corbett, who's going to talk about sort of auctions or observations to date around auctions this year.
Yeah, cool. So hi everyone, my name is Tyler. I'm one of the ETS auction operators over at NZX for the ETS auctions. And I've been lucky enough to be on this project since the June auction. And I'll kind of give you a couple of observations that we've seen on our side of the auction so far. So starting out there, this table here shows you the auction trends that we've noticed through 2021. And so obviously starting out with the auction clearing price, what you can see there is that the price has doubled in December compared to March, close to doubled, sorry. And obviously the biggest spike in price that we saw throughout the year was that September auction, with the price at $53.85. And obviously that was quite interesting because that was the auction where the CCR was hit, where we sold those extra units, and the price still increased by 29%. We did notice that with this December auction, it was a lot quieter. If you look at that row there for the number of participants, you can see that participation rate was down, with only 26 participants taking part. That kind of lost the trend that we had throughout the year of around 40 participants taking part in the auction. And if you look at that successful participants, once again, 18 compared to 31 in September, and then 16 in June. So we did notice overall it was a lot quieter, and we saw that through the registrations as well. So looking at the new participants registered throughout the year, we were kind of solid at 16 registrations per auction, and with that December auction, we did have around 8. And once again, you do see that that trend shown in the total amount of NZUs that were bid for. Around 9 million NZUs were bid for. Obviously, in that September auction, we did double that with 18 million. And throughout the year, we did have kind of a constant around 10, 11 million. Settlement value. So, of course, September was the busiest auction that we had. Settlement value for that was around 600 million. Despite December being the quietest, we still settled at around 323 million. And one last kind of key thing to note about here is that we did settle in total $1.3 billion in NZU funds, and we did fully deploy all 23 million units that were available. What you will also notice here is that comparing the number of participants that took part in the auctions to those that were successful, on average throughout 2021, we had about 65% of participants that were successful in winning NZUs, which is quite an interesting statistic to look at. In terms of registrations looking forward, so what we've observed over 2021 is that there has been some steady growth throughout the year, as mentioned. So looking at 16 registrations per auction. We're currently sitting at 87 participants fully registered for the ETS auctions. And obviously, as you can see there, it's tapered out throughout December. But this is kind of expected. We are at the tail end of the year. And a lot of the participants that want to register, that need to register, they've kind of already done it at the start of the year. Sweet. And then what we noticed in terms of registrations, we did try and make the process as easy as possible for everyone. But there were a couple of hurdles, just a few that we noticed we needed to help up participants out a little bit more with. The biggest one being, and the most common one being, that participants did not let the EPA know of their intentions to participate in the auctions. So basically, before you register with the ETS auctions, you do need to have an auction account holder account with the registry. And once you have that, we will then be able to create your registration with the ETS auctions. And once again, with that, a couple of participants did find it hard to find their invite code in the registry. And we do have videos, we do have details on how to do this in our training schedule that's available on our website, basically outlining the whole process there for you. To give you a quick rundown of our registration process. So what happens is we will receive a registration from you guys. We will open your statutory declaration. And we'll compare those details with what is on the registry. So we make sure that what we have in the ETS auctions system matches what is in the registry. And so we did have a couple of problems with participants coming through with a stat deck that did not reflect what was in the registry. And so we just had to reach out to these participants and get those fixed. And also a couple of queries around how to get those witnessed by an approved witness, especially in lockdown, that proved to be a problem. For those of you that are looking to register in the future, just note, if you are struggling to get out to an approved witness, you can get those witnessed online through the JOP, the Justice of Peace website. just if you are struggling there. Sweet, moving on to collateral. So one thing we do want to get across is that the collateral process for us is a two-step process spanning over 2 days. So on day one, we will receive collateral funds in the collateral account from participants, and basically any funds that we receive before 3 p.m. We'll send out a generic confirmation email, and this is basically just saying, hey, we have received funds from you. We will reconcile this tomorrow morning. And then come day two, we'll reconcile that against your account in the ETS auction system next morning. And then from there, an automatic email confirmation will be sent to you. And that will basically instruct you saying, hey, your collateral has been updated in the system. Go check it out. So some key observations that we found, the most common issues, and this was just with a couple of participants, was as mentioned by the ministry, we do need to make sure that when we receive collateral, it is coming from the nominated bank account that the participant has elected. And so we check all bank accounts that we receive collateral from, and we make sure that this lines up with what we have in our system. Obviously, this is due to KYC, AML procedure that we have. And so when this happens, we do just reach out to you and find out why and investigate why that's happened. And also, as mentioned by the ministry, when we do receive a payment without a reference, it is kind of hard to match that up with the participant. Obviously, as mentioned, there's 87 participants. So putting that registry number in the reference is super, super important. Around collateral timing, we all know that there are strict guidelines and regulation in the collateral in terms of collateral and when it can be received. Bear in mind the time that it takes to arrive in the collateral account. Bear in mind, international transfers and all that stuff, how long it takes to get there, because unless it's cleared funds in the collateral account, we cannot accept that as collateral. And then on the case of non-cash collateral, once again, as mentioned by the ministry, we do need to have greater warning of when you are going to submit non-cash collateral. Sweet. Moving forward onto bidding. So this graph here, this shows you the number of registered participants against those that are actually taking part in the auction, and then once again from those that are successful in the auction. And what's really, really interesting to see here is the difference between those that are registered and those that are participating. So obviously that gap is getting bigger. And what we see here is that over 2021 in general, we had around 50% participation rate, meaning that half the amount of people registered were actually bidding. And then you can see that big gap for the December auction where we actually had 30% participants bidding in the auction. And the reason for this is what we have noticed is that there are those participants that will register, they'll bid in one auction, and then they won't for the rest of them. There are some that bid in any one-off auction or one or the other. And so that is kind of expected towards December. But what is really, really interesting to think about here is if this gap did shrink, especially coming into 2022, if more of those registered participants were bidding in the auction, what would that look like in terms of the auction results? During an auction, we do get a lot of calls from participants that have bid and just getting confirmation, hey, I've bid, can you see it on your system? The rule of thumb here, just know that if you can see it in the system, we can see it. Basically, the reason you are probably calling is because you do want that clarification that those bids have come through. And that does kind of beg the question of, does there need to be greater confirmation? Does there need to be a pop-up saying your bids have been accepted? Does there need to be an email confirmation around that? Several times we do get participants calling us saying they can't access the bidding system or that it's not working correctly. A lot of the time that is because the participants aren't using an accepted web browser, so that'll be Internet Explorer, or a lot of the time that is because they are using their mobile phone. So we prefer, we recommend that you use Safari, Chrome, Firefox, and that you're ideally on a laptop. Finally, we are noticing that, we do check in on you guys during the bidding window, and we do check on participants that haven't made any bids throughout the auction. And leading up to that last 45 minutes, we do give you guys a call, and it is kind of interesting to see the amount of people that have either forgotten about the auction or were unaware of the timelines there. And lastly on that, we have noticed that a couple of participants have been using that bid stack file, which is awesome. It is a really, really cool function, and we do get questions come through on that as to the maximum amount of bids they can put in a bid stack file. Obviously, the answer to that is 200 bids, and if you do want to do any more than that, you will have to submit 2 bid stacks. Sweet. Moving on to settlement. There's a question.
There's a question. We have a question from Richard Norris. Why couldn't units already held in account be used as collateral instead of posting cash or LCs?
Well, again, we're bound by regulations at the moment. That's not something that's part of process, but that's certainly something that can be brought up in the future and discussed with the ministry. It's not the first time we've heard that as well. So that's, there's a number of these suggestions that we get, and they're all good, and we do discuss them.
I think when we're talking about sort of certainly seeing if we can enhance the collateral calculation, probably something like certainly something like that could probably go into the mix as well too, around looking and saying, well, is there other forms of collateral or other ways of posting, be able to post more efficient collateral? This is to mention, this is certainly more of a policy decision. I recall it was talked about when the design of auctions was talked about a few years ago by the ministry. It came up in that forum, and I think it's certainly still a live topic, and I think we would certainly like to put it into the mix of enhancements to the collateral calculation methodology.
Another question from Tim Street. For those that use cash as collateral, is there a requirement that they provide a first ranking security interest in respect of the cash deposit?
Not that I'm aware.
I think so. It's just cash. Is it?
Just cash, yeah. Just cleared cash. Yeah.
Cleared cash.
Cleared funds, yeah. That's all. Cool. I'll carry on there. So in terms of 2021 for settlement, it's been a good year in the sense that we've had no defaults, no late payments, no overpayments, which is really awesome to see. And the reason behind that, if you take a look at this table over here, showing the percentage of total settlement paid at time T. So you can see here that on average, 98% of funds are received the day before settlement. So that means that we are getting a majority of those funds in before settlement day. And as you can see, 60% of participants are actually paying their invoice on T+3, which is really, really good to see. In terms of observations, a lot of participants do elect to use their collateral. In fact, most of them do. And for those that do not elect to use the collateral, we do reach out to them and we just make sure that is in fact what they're wanting to do. A lot of the times they have just forgotten and they just needed that reminder. The settlement process is very similar to the collateral process. It is a 2-step process. So when you do make that settlement payment, just bear in mind that it won't be shown in your auction account until the next day. And of course, because it is similar, we do have those same issues sometimes with participants paying from a non-nominated bank account and also not including the reference in the payment. And finally, around settlement, on settlement day, we do get a couple of calls asking the timing of when NZUs actually get sent out. So as per regulation, as per the guidelines, we do send NZUs out as soon as we have totally settled the market or as soon as practical after that. And so it will be after that period there. Sweet. And finally, just to finish up, so I have mentioned a lot about the notifications that we send out as market operators. Obviously, as I mentioned, We do have a lot of participants that are still missing those deadlines. So as you can see here, we have pre-auction notices. So we send out a notification when your registration has been verified, when it's been approved. Then leading up to an auction, we do send out a 30-day auction reminder. And once you've updated your collateral, we send out an email then as well. Once the auction has actually happened, we send out an email saying that the auction results are up and that your invoices are published. And then leading up to settlement, we do send out a 2-day default warning and an invoice fully paid notification as well. But what we want to know here is, with all these notifications, we are still getting just a couple of participants that are missing those deadlines. Does that mean that we should be sending out more notifications? Are there areas where we're lacking the communication out to the market? Or on the flip side, are we sending out too much? Is there too much in your inbox? Would you like us to cut down on those? But yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Great. Okay, thanks very much, Tyler. Certainly a lot to cover in there. There's a question from Jennifer about the ability to download bids, and I think you mentioned in there about the confirmation messages for bids to be received. Have we got anything on the
so again,
plans on that?
Again, when I'll be talking, that is one of the things that we did want to have a look at. Obviously, with any product or platform that you create, you have a product pipeline, and you feed it with suggestions from the market or or learnings from the operator. Certainly, sending confirmations or the ability to to observe what bids you put in is on the pipeline. In the more shorter term, and I'll be repeating this again, but on the shorter term, we're looking also at being able to delete multiple bids. At the moment, I guess we didn't anticipate the amount of bids that actually get deleted. And at the moment, it's a bit of a one-by-one process, but something that we will have available for the next auction is to delete multiple bids.
Great. All right. Is there any observations or comments that people online here might want to make about what they've seen in the auctions to date? We've only had 4 of them so far. It's been quite a steep learning curve, I think, for everybody. But is there any initial observations that people might want to share at this point? No, nothing. There must be something. Has it worked? Has it not worked for you?
I think, look, I'll give an observation. I think the engagement between participants, between the ministry, has been really good. When we first kicked this off before the first auction, and just after, a lot of people reached out to us just to discuss the process, to discuss how the platform was. We were obviously very interested in that. It was new for us. We were learning, and so that worked really well. So the overall engagement and communication was excellent. So from that aspect,
okay,
we should look to continue that.
And we've got Susan. Susan's raised her hand.
No, I have John Southworth.
John has. Sorry.
Yeah. Hey, yeah, sorry. Look, I haven't had the privilege of seeing the screens, but we used to be able to do undisclosed bids and offers, which would alleviate some of those issues that some people are talking about, and struggling to maybe clear bids or get bids off the screen. And by putting undisclosed in there, you're really not showing your hand until quite late, and there's normally a limit. There's normally a minimum amount that would be, and it might just aid people to be a bit more forthright with acting in that market. So yeah, having undisclosed volume bids. And
but that's is that like a bit of a stack, a bid stack, or showing the depth of what the bids are? Is that what you
only show price? Yeah, you only show price, and it's got to be a minimum volume. It's got to be a minimum volume, which is normally quite large, but it could also be very large. Could be $10 million, or it could be you could have the cutoff at $1 million. So the bid could be $1 million worth, or at whatever volume at that price. And it does actually allow people to. It cleans up the screen rather than people having to stack bids up all over the place and then try and figure out where everyone else is at and then try and pull stuff off.
Because it is. I mean, it is a blind auction. You're not seeing anybody else's bids in there.
Okay, sorry, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah. So there's a blind. It is a blind auction, which I think leads to your point also that it's extremely difficult to actually know what the sentiment might be in the market during the auction without actually seeing those volumes there.
Why make it blind?
Yeah. Look again.
Why not make it open?
Why not make it open? And I think that's something that that's something that could certainly go onto the list of potential enhancements going forward. Again, this comes back to the design that was set up within the regulations around a blind market. So I can't say off the top of my head exactly what the rationale behind that was, but I think certainly we could use this forum as an opportunity to look at things like that around enhancements.
Yeah, I mean the equity market trades in the open all the time and matches, so it gives people more confidence, I think. Yeah, I don't know what the traders out there on the call think, but it does give people more confidence in the equity markets.
Yeah,
it's Richard Norris here. From a user perspective, I think the auction is very straightforward, simple, and clear. As a blind auction, for that very point, I can't rely on it for volume, so it's only an opportunistic mechanism. So the bulk of the volume that we'll acquire is on the secondary market, and so from that perspective of being more open, I think that would be more confidence in using the option for that.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Richard. Matthew, do you have a comment? Because you were involved in some of this design.
I don't have a comment. I think I can't list them all off the top of my head in terms of the rationale for going with a closed bid rather than open bid, but I just think that everyone should think about what the consequences would be if there was an open bid and how reliable that might make the sort of like securing of volume, because all I think it would do is would basically push the bidding all the way back to the right at the end of the bidding window, where everybody would try to get that confidence or security of volume by constantly changing their bid as well. So I think it could push quite a bit of chaos into that back end of the bidding window. I just just before I go, I actually just had a question for people, which I think was maybe if there's kind of like everyone sort of seems to be pretty comfortable with the process of the auctions ran, which I think is a great reflection on the year's work. But I wonder whether I'd be interested in hearing people's perspective on how well that the interaction between the auction and the secondary market has been. Like, do we think that the primary market has been well supported by the secondary market, or has had sort of like adverse reactions in terms of the timing of people's trades as well? And I don't have any perspective on that, but I'd be really interested in hearing people's views. Thanks.
Thanks, Matthew. Any views on that question?
In regards to the secondary market?
Yes.
Yeah, it's Nigel Brunel from Jarden here. A couple of things. I mean, I think they go hand in hand, those two markets. I think we've seen considerable rise in volume in the secondary market since the auctioning's been going. Now, we can't exactly say that's all due to auctioning, because we've had a changed ETS with the removal of the fixed price option. So that's brought a lot more activity back into the market. But we think they've complemented each other very well. There's been exceptionally good liquidity that we've seen through the market between the auctions, and good liquidity post the auction as well. I mean, very interesting. There was considerable volume done in sort of September, October, when the market pretty much went sideways, when you expect volumes to sort of to back off. But look, to Richard's point, I think, and to Matt's point, I think the blind auction complements the market very well, and that's the way for the government to basically get rid of its volume into the market. It seems to work well. The only thing we would say is auctions, it's a bit like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get, whereas in the secondary market, you know exactly what you're going to get. So the proper approach for emitters to take is to actually be present in both markets. And to some extent, if you're worried about not getting set in the auction, there's plenty of volume to be set for you to get set in the secondary market. And in fact, if you look, and we've only had 1 year of auctions, but every clearance, the spot market's never gone below every clearance rate. So even though the first auction cleared below the secondary market, every other auction cleared above the secondary market and stayed above the secondary market. So to some extent, you might have been better off to have bought into the secondary market. But I think you should take a portfolio approach and look to buy in both markets, because the volume's there in the auctioning and the certainty is there in the secondary market. So the combination of those two is where we see those markets working very well together.
Great, thanks, Nigel. Did you also have anything else? You had your hand raised.
That was it.
That was it. Great, thank you. Sarah Finn.
Hey. One would be a bit of feedback on the default emails. Could we not have them on a weekend? And could we have them after the first settlement window on a day? So we're generally finding that you'll get them Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then 5 minutes later we receive your payment has been reconciled. So that's just if we want to improve the defaults. The other question is, what is the MFE constraint around actually settling auction units at time of receipt of a bidder's invoice and versus having to wait for everybody to have paid prior to transfer?
You want to take that, Tim?
What's MFE's view?
What do you want to explain how we constrained in terms of what we've?
Look. Obviously, a lot of the changes, as what we've said, is actually constrained to the current regulations. Something that we've looked at, something that we've discussed with MFE, and something that we've received feedback on is around that. And obviously, we believe that there is room to change that. There is certainly operational capacity to dispatch units at time of payment or reduce that, but obviously that's a regulation constraint which needs to go through certain consultations. These are things that we do discuss with the ministry, and as I've said earlier, we have a good relationship there, and these things are taken into consideration.
If there is certainly a demand for it, I think it's something we could certainly look to talk further with the ministry about, sort of on behalf of participants as well too, because I think it has been raised by a couple of participants, haven't they, around a faster settlement, around receipt of units. Yeah,
certainly, that's right.
Okay, John Southwood, do you have anything you already asked?
Sorry, yeah, I got invited to ask a question, and that was about international fungibility and of inbound and outbound securities, and maybe some derivative development. But seeing that Nigel's on the call here, I'm going to probably embarrass myself. So, look, I was actually part of the original this original group back in 06 or 07, and I was brought in to make some comments from a market's point of view. And at that stage, I talked about the shunting of stock and the issues that were going to occur, and they occurred. Nigel, you're probably going to have some comments about that, but I do wonder whether the time has sort of one moved on, and also the fidelity behind instruments. You may be able to look at that, because it would give more depth. It'd give more depth to the market. Let me go through a couple of these points here. So, if you can find some instrument, develop more depth into the market, I think then you'll reduce some of this volatility, and that then spins off into more confidence by capital providers in the marketplace, and gives a better price signal. I suppose also from my markets background, I've just stepped down as chair of a small listed wind farm called New Zealand Wind Farms, which I was in there for about 5 years, is trying to turn it around. Yep. But look, if you could develop the market, the secondary market, a bit further, and re-engage with whether Australia's how they're going to change their carbon design, or if there are some products that are close that you could provide more depth, I think it'd give the market what you're trying to do with the signalling with this price. You're going to have a much more robust signal to the to who you're trying to influence at the end of the day, rather than having maybe distorting prices. Because I'm sorry, but I've got to say, if a government designs a market, the market's going to try and find a way to beat it, and that does inject risk. So you want to try to reduce that risk. So I'll just leave it at that. Yeah. I think that's sort of the general thrust. Throw it out there, Nige.
Yeah, good. Thanks, John. Any comments on that?
Yeah, I'm not sure that's. I mean, some of them are all very good points. I think from John, but I don't quite think that's the right forum at the moment for this discussion, which is really around I'm seeing this discussion or this group around the functioning of the auction. How has that gone? How has that been for participants? And I think some of the issues have sort of been raised around, the posting of collateral and how that's done. And overall, I think this auction system's gone very, very well. Government's moved $1.3 billion worth of volume into the market. I think overall the market's been, the auctions have gone off very well. They've all succeeded in regards to going above the clearing price. I don't really have a lot of issues. I think some of it's around general tweaking. Is there an opportunity later on, and maybe for another forum, to discuss around how the market might develop further in regards to derivatives and so forth, probably outside this forum?
Yeah, that's right. It is outside this forum, Nigel, and I think we're also looking a little bit push for time as well too. But certainly, John, very good points. And we've got sort of James Coombs from the Ministry is still online here as well too. So there's no doubt sort of noted some of the points you've made. I think there's certainly big points in there around, or sort of big matters around there, sort of around policy issues as well. Policy issues. So I think John, if it's okay, we'll just park that for now. Susan, have you got another comment?
I've got a question. We've got some international clients asking about the auction system in New Zealand, how it's working, how the architecture might be used to internationalise it, as it were.
Yeah. Maybe
it's a little bit out of scope, but I'm getting the question, so I'd like to give an answer. I mean, I usually say that it's a really great system and so on and so forth, but which it is, it's working pretty well for multiple objectives. But yeah, just about the structure and the derivative issues comes into that too, because these people deal with equities of whatever type. This is just another one to them. Yep. So just would be very interested in any people's comments on that point.
Okay, I want just given that we're looking a bit push for time now, Susan, it's something that we can talk offline about as well. And just to give you, if you are talking to some other participants as well too, we've got some collateral here that we could use. We could share with you around the auctions as well, the design of it, the design of the market, which might be helpful as well. So perhaps we get in contact after the meeting.
Yep, sure. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, look, I know we have got we're a little bit constrained though for time. If everybody's happy, we'll just continue through. Yeah. I think we've only got about 20 or so minutes. So I think Tim will just who's going to next? George next. George, we'll move on to you.
All right. Thanks, Shane. I thought it'd be interesting to give you guys a view of what we see as the auction operator throughout the auction. Most of you in this call will be familiar with this view of the auction system. It's the participant's view. However, as the auction operator, we get to see a few additional screens help us monitor the auction. And so throughout an auction, this is what we get to see. And I'll just walk you through the screens one by one, starting with this clearing price calculation graph. We use this clearing price calculation graph to kind of visualize how the auction's playing out. Bids get stacked from highest to lowest throughout the auction, and this graph updates live, with a key part of it being this red line, which shows the price triggers at the bottom with the $20 minimum bid. And then once the price gets above that CCR price, which was $50 this year, we get additional volume come into play at the top. Wherever on the graph that I'll show you next, there's a red circle that will indicate where the clearing price currently is in the market. So this will commonly be what the graph looks like throughout the auction. As I said, the bids stacked from highest to lowest, and as it crosses that 4.75 million units sold, that's where the clearing price would sit. For this example, it's about $37. And then if we hit a CCR, the graph adjusts more like this, and the red dot moves along the red trigger price until the additional volume is sold. It also helps visualize how many units are available, or how many units are at that price. So if we were trying to push through a price, and for the clearing price to go up or down, how much units it would have to adjust, the price would change. The next graph of table I'd like to show you is the bid stack file, which is quite similar to what participants see during an auction. We can sort it by user, participant, quantity, price, and the time that it was placed. And so we're able to see all the participants' bids stacked up here. As Tyler mentioned, if you can see it on your end, we can see it on our end. But an additional feature of this graph is the circles, the status of the circles to the left of the bids, with green indicating that they'd be successful at the current clearing price, red they're below the clearing price, so it'd be unsuccessful, and the orange shows us where the clearing price is and how many bids are at that clearing price. And of course, these are tied bids, so not all units bid for would be sold at this price. Finally, I just want to walk down to the participant details screen. We get to see all participants and how much collateral or bid volume they're able to submit. And it shows us the participant's name, how much they use, how much is remaining, and what percentage of collateral is left. So throughout an auction, it would look similar to this. As Tyler mentioned, if we're noticing that you're not placing any bids, or you've only made a small amount of your bids, or your collateral as bids, that's probably where we'd pick up the phone and give you a call to make sure that everything was all right on your end. In this example, we'd probably be calling participants 4, 5, and 7 just to ensure that everything was all right on their end. And so as a whole, this is what the graph, our view looks like. As the auction progresses at the top left, we get a live update of what the clearing price is currently settled at, how many units are available, how much has been bid for, and then how much has been matched at the current price.
Okay, great. Thanks, George. Okay, so we've got 15 minutes left. So what I wanted to do here is just to go through a bit of a journey. A lot of you went through this with us, but just coming through, it's been a very interesting journey for us, and I think for others also. We've certainly enjoyed it from late 2019 when we first responded to the RFP. There was a lot of discussions around proposed structure and process, system platforms, etc. And going from that to submitting tender and being accepted in early 2020. We were obviously elated at the time when that news came through, and we set about making design or turning design into reality, and we did so in about 6 months. We wouldn't have been able to achieve that without the support and the engagement with the MFE and our partners EEX. We designed and built the Managed Auction Service, or MAS, with the help of our software partners, Akama, here in Wellington, and we evolved a bidding system, which you've seen, to suit New Zealand's needs with the help of KB Tech in the UK. So it all started to fit together quite nicely during the implementation and testing phases. We had a semi-live platform where we could hold countless simulations, placing ridiculous bids with imaginary money, and started to mimic what we thought these auctions would look like. We went through the screens that George just showed you, trying to, as I say, is to mimic any sort of possibility, settlement defaults, overpayments, all that kind of stuff. We went through every situation that could occur. We're very happy with the systems. We started looking at our process, working within the regulations. We started ensuring that our internal processes and controls were fit for purpose, our communication lines effective, and our reference material detailed and easy to understand. As I mentioned, we took some of you along with us on that journey. We held a few webinars, training webinars, how to register, how the collateral works. We reached out to some of you just to run certain processes by you, get your feedback. Thank you to all of those that assisted there. And we suddenly found ourselves at auction day in March earlier this year. So at that time, that morning, I remember it well, we were obviously a few nervous operators here at NZX at the time. We had a event going on in the room next door, which James Shaw officially opened the auction for us, and we were away. For the next 3 hours, and I've got to be honest, it was a bit of an anticlimax for us. The bids started rolling in, things went really well. We got a few phone calls, I think, as the chaps have mentioned. We can't access the system. That's because you're on Internet Explorer or on your phone. And I've just entered some bids. Can you see them? Yes, we can. So you can. And we closed out that first auction without a hitch. We went through our post-auction processes, returning collateral, etc. And now here we are, having completed the fourth auction. So after that implementation in March, we were able to add a few features and a few learnings into the system, allowing the participant to elect to use collateral for settlements within the system, adding that tick box, enhancements to the communication channels, allowing us to send more notices from the system, automated some, acknowledging payments, automated reminders, etc. We built into process, as George mentioned, keeping an eye on bids during the auction. If you'd posted collateral but you hadn't bid, you'll likely get a call from us just to make sure everything's okay. Changes to the settlement invoice as well. We took some feedback from you and we updated those to reflect the collateral contributions. And we worked within the regulations, obviously, to speed up the return of unused collateral after the auction. Generally, we try and process that a day after the auction from this side. And obviously, during all of that, there's a few internal changes again just to bolster our operational processes. There's a few we're working on in the short term. As I mentioned earlier, allowing participants to delete multiple bids. We are seeing a little bit of that activity coming through, people placing bids and then later deleting and changing their mind, a change of behaviour. So we feel that could be quite useful. We're looking at reducing the registration process. Currently, it's a two-step process, providing your statutory declaration to us, going through a process there, and then later providing bank account or certified bank account details. And we'll be turning that into one process just to try and make it a little bit more streamlined. With the learnings, etc., that we've had and changed the process, we'll be changing our reference material, so keep an eye out on that. We talked earlier about mail acknowledgements for bids placed. We feel that could be quite useful, and I think that what we'll try and build into that is a yes, I'd like that, or a no, that's too busy for me sort of functionality, so you can turn it on and off from an operational point, from a participant's point of view. So, and again, there's a few things internally that we'll be putting in just to firm up our processes. As I said earlier, we are constrained by regulations in terms of these changes, but we are very happy that we are able to work collaboratively with the ministry, discuss these variations, and any feedback or suggestions that we do get from you, we certainly have the opportunity to discuss with the ministry and do. A couple of things that we'd like to do into the future, and again, I'm going to be repeating myself a little bit here, but the deadlines for placing collateral. currently sitting at 5 days prior to the auction. Again, we feel that that's something that can be looked into. Perhaps a 2-day lead time might be sufficient there. Time taken between completion of the auction to receiving settlement, transferring units, etc. We feel that perhaps that could be worked on to speed that process up as well. Collateral methodology was something that we that I mentioned earlier as well. So what we're looking to do is to better reflect the maximum bidding capacity by recalculating what your maximum potential invoice amount could be and allocating that collateral accordingly. We've had discussions with the ministry on this topic, and I understand this is under current review. We'll be sharing these slides later, so feel free to take this away and digest. But using the methodology that we have here in the situation that we've got, in order to place the bids that we have there, bid 1, 2, and 3 under the current methodology, you would need $1 million of collateral. Under the way that becomes more reflective, you would only need 750,000. It's certainly a way to maximise that collateral capacity. So what I'm interested in, what we're interested in here is anything we've missed. We're interested in your views. The ministry is here. They are interested as well. Is the period of time between posting collateral and the auction settlement fine? Is it okay as it is? Is the time before auction, is that okay as it is, or does it need change? Any issues with the platforms, with the bidding platform or the managed auction service? Anything that we can be doing differently in there? Great to have that feedback on the default notifications. It's certainly something that we'll be taking away and throwing into the pipeline. Communication channels, as has been mentioned here, too much, too little, anything more that we can do there. The cost containment reserve, is that as effective as perhaps intended? What are your views around that? What are your views on the revisions into the next couple of years? We mentioned earlier, should this be a secretive auction, or is more transparency necessary? An open bid stack, disclosure on who bidders are. Whilst we're not suggesting this, we're very interested in what you think. Sort of closing out here, obviously our preference is to have these in person, as Shane mentioned earlier. We are in Wellington. We'll look to hold these also in Auckland, but please do reach out to us. We'll be circulating a user satisfaction survey early on in next year. Please be open in this. It's an opportunity for you to be vocal. Let us know how we're doing, how the auctions are doing, positive or negative. Really keen to discuss this. If you're in Wellington, reach out to us, come and see us, come and have a coffee, come and visit. That'll be really good. Thank you. Back to you.
Okay, thanks very much, Tim. So look, we are getting pressed for time at this particular point. Is there any, just before we sort of finish up, is there any sort of comments or anything that anyone would like to raise at this particular point? I think there'll be certainly an opportunity. We'll be putting out minutes after this meeting and notes and encapsulating things that have been raised today as well too, for further feedback and comment. So there's always that opportunity to contact us directly on it. But just before we finish off, is there anything else or anything that is deeply pressing that anyone would like to raise at this point? No, there doesn't appear to be. Susan, you've still got your hand raised. Is there something that you wanted to talk about?
No, I just pushed the wrong button.
Go on.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you. And John as well too?
No, I'm all good. Thanks.
Good. Okay, thanks, John. All right. Well, thank you very much for your attendance this afternoon. It's been a pleasure to host this. It's been difficult, and I recognise it's challenging over this format. I just want to thank today Tim, Tyler, George, Rebecca, who's off the screen, is helping coordinate this as well. And also we've got Mark, our IT expert, who's behind the screen, making sure that from a technology side this is all working. So thank you all. Thank you for that. Look, that just really leaves me just to wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. It's been a tough year for everyone. I hope you really just have an enjoyable holiday break and no doubt take a well-deserved rest. Look, we'll hopefully see you next year. Certainly, ideally in person. That's our preference. So on that note, we'll say thanks and goodbye.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.